Hi everybody, I'm Phil Montgomery, Director of Client Service for the UK and Ireland here at CGA, and I'm here today to take you through the lay of the land in the on-trade with a specific focus on the opportunity for spirits as we move towards the reopening in less than a month's time. In terms of a bit of housekeeping for the next 10 minutes or so, we'll first check in on what 2020 meant for the spirits category in the GB on-trade and what did we learn from the first reopening last year. From there, we'll focus on 2021 and the big macro challenges that the spirits category faces and what are the vehicles that can be used to engage consumers and ensure that spirits really benefit when all the outlets return in the next few months. I wanted to start off today by just focusing on the year that was 2020 and the catastrophic impact that the restrictions and lockdowns had on the hospitality sector, which meant that by the end of 2020, annual turnover was down 54% year on year. For context, the sector as a whole was worth 133 billion in annual revenue in 2019 and actually was in relatively good shape. But by the end of last year, we'd seen losses of over 70 billion, equating to nearly 200 million pounds a day in losses. And a big part of that lost revenue was a result of closures in the market. We know that 1 in 5 outlets are yet to reopen since March last year, a stark number that provides a lot of challenges for every category. But of those that could trade, while pubs were able to open quicker in 2020 and restaurants had competitive advantage during the substantial meal policy, there were other challenges in the areas of the market that had a profound impact on spirits. The challenge for spirits was that its heartland of bars really struggled to reopen in the face of restrictions, which as a result put pressure on the category. But it also had to contend with other channels where sectors like LED were more influential in the sales mix in the likes of pubs, and therefore actually trying to have that competitive advantage to succeed was a real challenge. And we see that really coming through when we look at the year-on-year performance over the reopening period for spirits relative to other categories. While we see overall a negativity across every sector, with its category heartland devastated by the effects of the virus, in the period from reopening to from the 4th of July to the end of the year, we saw spirits share that was seeing growth pre-lockdown falling into reverse and actually losing out to the likes of LED. You know, while all major categories have seen significant declines in the period post-reopening, draft beer, which consumers had not really been able to replicate at home during lockdown, outperformed the wider drinks market and as a result gained share. But the challenge is for spirits is that while this position was not favourable, what are the lessons that we can learn from this first reopening period and how can we apply that to the new trading conditions, which we'll come on to in a second. One of the big parts for spirits' challenges is that the category has always struggled to tap into earlier day part. The chart really clearly shows that all spirits category consumption was weighted towards the late night prior to lockdown, with other categories really more successfully able to unlock the earlier day parts. So for spirits and suppliers and operators in that space, looking to maximise the return of the category, driving sales into the earlier day parts is now going to be really key for success, certainly in the initial reopening, but also longer term in 2021. And we know there is still a job to do. When we look at spirit mixer consumption and how that has shifted in day part, we saw that it didn't really change much as the market reopened from the first lockdown to the end of December. Even with the implementation of the 10 p.m. curfew, it didn't shift that profoundly. So the message is really clear. It's how do we encourage our retail partners, of your suppliers, to really engage with spirits in those earlier day parts, and how do we use those serve mechanisms to really bring that to life in the mind of the consumer? Because as much as this is a challenge for spirits at present, we shouldn't be put off by the fact there is a big opportunity there still. We still know that, and we should be confident that the value of spirits can bring to an outlet is there. We know that nearly 80 million consumers continue to engage with spirits, which equates to a third of the overall population. And that's just really brings into context how influential that consumer is, despite the fact that, you know, we had that continued closure of the late night sector. I think what's also a really important education piece from a spirits perspective is that while 80 million consumers are still drinking spirits out at home, it is an influential consumer as well. So we know that over half of all drinking visits to mainstream brands in the last 6 months were made up by spirits consumers. So the spirit consumer is a consumer who is, you know, most engaged with it on trade, goes out the most, spends the most, and therefore continuing to tap into that and try and drive some of these challenges so that when we do have reopening, people are making the most of their spirits offer is certainly a key thing that we need to be articulating to the industry. I think what's also really important to understand is that the changing nature of spirits as a result of the last reopening. So while pre-COVID and pre the first lockdown, we continued to see that gin momentum growing exponentially over the last few years, we actually saw a marked change in that over the last period, with licks and specs in particular gaining traction. First of all, that was driven by shots and shooters in the initial reopening, where people were looking to give that celebratory sense in outlets. But then what we also saw coming through as we saw the movement towards restrictions and substantial meal was actually cocktails being a big part of it as well. So as much as we can talk about the value of spirits, it's about ensuring that our offer is fit for purpose, and the penetration we can have with these categories is ultimately going to come down to serve. But driving that sense of education is going to be really key as we move into 2021. I think what we'll also need to contend with from a spirits perspective is some of the new trading landscape that we will have to vie with coming out of lockdown 3.0. And they've been distilled really into 4 really key challenges that we want to explore a little bit more now. The first one is the shift to lower tempo with confidence in the market, at least initially focusing on lower tempo occasions. Spirits will need to have that key strategy and to unlock that more food-led lower tempo occasion. And because we saw previously that was a really effective area where other categories were able to gain traction. Outside drinking is obviously something that we need to contend with as well as from a spirits perspective. It's the trading reality from April 12th and understanding the position of spirits has in consumer repertoires in this area, and the key customer strategy you need to undertake is going to be really important to make the most of this trading restriction. I think what we also saw is a lot of consumers discovering local in the last reopening and that discovery of local venues, and with seeing no sign of shifting post lockdown 3.0, how can spirits support and spirits brands support local licensees to engage the new consumers walking through the door and make the most of their spirits offer? And then finally, with table service and pressure coming through in terms of on range and also that traditional path to purchase being disrupted, how does premium spirits brands avoid being lost in consumers' purchasing choices and almost getting lost in the shuffle of all the changes that we're seeing in the market? So now I just wanted to briefly go through some of these points and just really explore what the implications are for spirits. If we think first of all about this shifting to a lower tempo food-led occasion, we know from our research that restaurants are the #1 venue where consumers are looking to visit on the reopening in the next few weeks. Secondly, followed by pubs. I think that means that comparatively it's going to be a key area of the market where we need to unpick the opportunity for spirits. And this food-led area definitely came through last year when we looked at restrictions and behaviours as well. We saw that actually there'd been a profound shift that in the pub and restaurant area of the market, people were not just visiting for food or drink, they were visiting both. Of course, some of that was driven by restrictions or like substantial meal, but it seems really clear that actually the direction of travel, at least initially, is going to be about that food-led offer and how we can tie into that, and so it provides a real challenge for spirits. But the good news is that we can get some really good learnings from what we know about how consumers choose food and drink choices when they are going out. We know that actually it's about complementing with food pairing, with also the kind of more transactional food deal. And these are areas where actually spirits has not traditionally played. It's more been the area of wine and LAD. But actually, is there a serve strategy opportunity for us to, from a spirits perspective, to really unpick this? And part of that actually, I think, is cocktails. Cocktails can play a really important role within food strategy. And we know that actually, when we look at the structure of a meal, either before, during or after, cocktails are engaged with. So it's actually, how do we ensure our executional standards are really in place? How are we ensuring that we're driving relevance across all the parts of the meal and making sure that the servers and menu mechanics are really pushing the value that cocktails can bring to complement that meal? And a big part of that also could potentially be the way we deliver cocktails as well. The challenge around cocktails for a lot of venues has been the complexity of that, not maybe having the skill in bartenders, but actually could draft or pre-batch be an option? We do know that that is engaged with. People are aware of those kind of offers, but actually when they do see them, they're more likely to go then and purchase them as well. So it gives us that kind of de-skilled solution that provides that great experience to the consumer that allows us to leverage cocktails as well. Just finally on the consumer piece around those occasion shift, while we are seeing that lower tempo food-led offer, it's important to reflect that actually confidence in the market is growing elsewhere as well. So that late night bar is coming back. We see year on year that consumers are starting to feel more confident and comfortable in these areas as we see to reopening. So as ever, it's about that multiverse strategy, but certainly that lower tempo food-led occasion is going to be key in the first instance. One of the other trading requirements is going to be the notion around outside seating and how we leverage spirits in this offer. We know that licensees are definitely going to follow there, because our research shows that those with outside areas relative to those that haven't do have a comparative sales advantage of 22%. I think the challenge we have for spirits is that of that 22%, we only see an uplift from a general spirits perspective of 18% overall in terms of that comparison, while the likes of specialities and gin see a slight over-index there. So I guess it's about how do we ensure, again, that the execution and our mechanics are really set up so that we can maximise the opportunity of the outdoor areas. And when we've asked consumers about what they're choosing in terms of outdoor space, what we know is that actually key serves are going to be really key in key categories. So we know that gin, cocktails and vodka have a real competitive advantage there present in terms of engagement. And it's how do we compete versus the lagers and wines of this world in that space and deliver the serves that are going to get people choosing those when they are sitting outside in a slightly alien environment. And it's about how being nuanced in how we do that as well, because the reality is that, while pubs will have outside seating, we're also seeing measures like Liverpool Without Walls, like measures in the Northern Quarter in Manchester and Kensington Council in London, where people are facilitating outside space even more so. So there is a lot of customer strategy that needs to tie into that provision for spirits in this space so that we do get the advantage of that as well. Engaging with local trends is going to be really important as well. So we know from our research over the lockdown period in the last year that actually people feel more comfortable staying local, and they've actually been discovering their local venues in the last year. I guess that provides an opportunity for local venues, but also provides an opportunity and a challenge, because are those local venues engaging with consumers who are new to them, who potentially will have been migrating to city centres pre-COVID and are looking for still those great experiences locally. And so there's an opportunity from a spirits perspective to really leverage that. And we know when we ask our business leaders, our survey of 750 leading execs in the out-of-home space, that actually this notion of staying local and investment in local is not going anywhere soon. And therefore, actually, it's something that we really need to be mindful of in 2021 and beyond. Because when we looked at it from a sales perspective, we saw that shift overall was with moving away from cities from a volume mix perspective towards large towns and small towns. And the key thing here is, how does spirits really gain more traction in that large town, small town area? Because it has been a profound challenge for the category and drives some of the overarching sentiment you saw at the top in terms of performance. When we've pulled this apart in terms of outlet type, it's really clear why we're seeing some of the challenges for spirits, and this local trend potentially provides a challenge to spirits. So what we've seen from a shifting dynamic is that in the total drink spend and sales overall, we've seen a shift towards that pub area of the market, that food community, more independent feel, and away from the bar nightclub, which is obviously a key area for spirits. And so actually, because we have such low levels of influence in the sales mix from a spirits perspective, it's about how do we bridge that gap and how do we drive education in these areas where sales have gone to in terms of pubs and local areas to really maximise the opportunity for spirits. And I think a big part of that is education. So again, when we ask consumers about cocktail engagement by those different location types, we see that actually what we're still seeing is, cocktails are being engaged with much more effectively in those bigger town centres and city centres, and not so much in rural and suburban. So with the outlet dynamic where you're having to contend as a licensee with new consumers, can we leverage spirits via cocktails to really unlock the opportunity around spirits and provide those solutions to the consumers, as well as cash in their tail for licensees? The last piece I just wanted to touch on was the new trading landscape and how premium needs to be able to win from the table. We've seen, obviously, this shifting landscape, but as a result of restrictions with apps and table service, the norm, and actually consumers engaging with it. I think alongside that, what we've seen from our business leaders survey is with these kind of more operational challenges, we're starting to see a more rationalizations of drink range, with spirits a really key area. I think the challenge that we have is how do we ensure that we protect spirits as possible, and certainly from a premium perspective, how do we justify that within the range so that actually we can really maximize the opportunity for premium and overall spirits. I think one of the big challenges is that we've seen it across business leaders is that, you know, there is a kind of polarization of choice come through as a result of last time's lockdown and where general consumer feeling is. Business leaders telling us that they're expecting increased demand from a high-end perspective around offerings and also value. And again, that's coming through when we ask consumers as well. So actually, a lot of them, 17% are looking to be more careful when they spend, but actually a fifth of them are also looking to treat themselves. So with these contrasting dynamics, how do we make sure that the full spirits range is being made the most of? And actually, how do we ensure that we don't get the range squeeze around premium? Because actually, when we look at the data from last time, from the reopening, we said that actually for the first time, there was almost an anti-premiumization where standard volume actually gained overall sales share relative to the other areas, and therefore actually it's something we really need to address. Again, when we look at it from an outlet type perspective, it's about how do we ensure the visibility of premium is really clear, because actually areas of the market that were gaining sales from a spirits perspective, the restaurants, the pubs, they were areas where Premium Plus's share of spirits brand stocks was very low. And so with the new executional dynamics around menu, around table service, how do we ensure that our visibility and our messaging is really clear so that we can maximize that premium spirits offer, which will obviously, as we've seen over the last few years, maximize the benefit of spirits overall. So lots to do there, but I think there's some really key actions for spirits when we look at 2021 and beyond. I think a big part of that from a supplier perspective is about reshaping call files and broadening and embracing local, because actually what we see overall is that local trend is going nowhere, but actually it provides a real spirit challenge to spirits. We also then know that we, as part of that, need to partner with our customers as they deal with a consumer reset. But within that as well, it's about how we executing within that lower tempo food-led area, as well as delivering that best-in-class solution from the table is going to be really important. Thank you very much.